before we pull the corn, and that would be when the corn, the leaves of the corn was turning brown. They hadn't turned brown yet. You know, they were green and they're starting to turn brown. And that meant the crop was, you know, pretty well done then. You were not going to have any effect on it. And my dad would have us go and strip those leaves off, and put them in bundles, and you stick them on a, you know, you'd be going down the row and you'd be stripping the leaves, and once you got a bundle, you tied it with one of the leaves, you know, corn leaves are pretty long, and you could tie it with that, and you would stick it up on top of one corn stalk, and you did that over the whole field. And then once you got that done, then you would go back and you would pull that fodder, you know, and put it in the wagon and take it to the house and put it in the barn. And then it wasn't hay, but it was, you know, horses and cows and things. They loved that. You know, it was a feed that they enjoyed, they did good with and all that, and we would have to do that sometimes. And of course, where we lived, and it was kind of hilly where we farmed, and it had terrace rows. You know, every acre or two there'd be a big terrace row to keep it from eroding. You know, years ago, people had cut those terrace rows with, you know, big plows and things to keep, you know, from washing out. And we would plant watermelons on those terrace rows because you couldn't plow, because if you plowed a terrace row and then the water broke through it, it would just deteriorate the whole field. So, but you could take a hoe or something like that, and you could dig out a place, you know, for watermelon seeds, and we would go up and down those terrace rows and plant watermelons in there. That way, when you're working in the field, you'd be looking to see if them watermelons got ripe, because you'd want to, by the 4th of July, they'd be starting to get ripe, and you could always take a break and pull your watermelon and go sit in the shade and eat that watermelon. You wouldn't need a bucket of water when you eat that watermelon, because it's kind of like drinking water anyhow. But that was a life that we knew. Now, we didn't know any better. We worked like that every day. You got out of bed in the morning when daylight came, and you worked outside. You did something every day. You know, your parents, especially when they were in charge of you. Now, when my dad would go to work and we'd go out to the field, sometimes there was a big bunch of plums over there, you know, plum trees over there. And it wasn't on our place, it was on the Fisher place. But when those plums would get ripe, my brother and I, we might work in the field for an hour or two, and we'd go over and we'd eat all the plums we could find. And then we'd go back to work in the field. I mean, that's the way life was. You know, you could find a grapevine and you'd climb 2 or 3 trees to get muscadines or possum grapes or crab apples. Anything like that was kind of a treat. I know in the spring of the year we ate maypops, and I don't know if you know what a maypop is, but it was a round like fruit thing. It started out just a small pod, and it grew, and it would be about the size of a lemon, and it would be full of seeds, and it would be juicy and sweet. But we would eat those maypops. They would only be around for 2 or 3 weeks when they started to get ripe. But they grew wild in the field, and that was one of the first in the field if there's any maypops around. But that was kind of the life we led. In the fall of the year, when the crops was all laid back, then it was our job to start cutting firewood, gathering kindling, and we would never have enough firewood. It didn't matter how much we cut, my brother and I. And we fought more than we cut, because a cross-cut saw requires 2 pretty good hands. You know, you got to pull it one way and then pull it the other way, and the saw needs to be sharp. And my brother was just no good at it, and he'd ride the end of the crosscut, and I'd be trying to get him to stop riding on it. And sometimes I would have to go over and help him by giving him a knot or two on the head or something.
I actually won a prize in the Scouts for being first place with crosscut saw.
But we would cut firewood, and we, like I say, we would cut it and we would haul it to the house. But you know, we never had enough, and then we would have to find kindling. You know, and some people call it fat wood, some people call it kindling, splinters, whatever. If you could find a pine tree that had fallen or something, it didn't rot, you know, down in the ground, the root down in the ground, that fat wood or kindling would be really good. It would be, you know, it would burn real good. You could start fires with it.
Be greasy.
Yeah. And we would, you find one of those, then you'd know where it was, and when the wintertime come, you would take an axe and you would go and cut into that and get as much kindling as you could, because starting a fire in a fireplace when it's, you know, 30 degrees outside in a house, it's not insulated at all. Required some skill, and you know, you didn't have newspapers and things like that to start a fire with. You had to have that pine kindling, and you laid in enough of that, and if you had enough of it, you could take one match, and you could light the end of that kindling and get it started, and then you could get your fire started. It was a skill involved in that, but my dad would be in the bed. Of course, he'd work nights. You know, daylight come, time to go to school or something like that, and it'd be cold. And one day I would have to get up and build a fire, and the next day my brother would have to get up and build a fire. And when I had to get up and build a fire, I always made sure I got the wood in and got the kindling in, because I knew, you know, I didn't want to be running around out there barefooted trying to get wood and everything in the dark. My brother, he never got his stuff in. And when my dad would call him, Buck, get up and build a fire, my brother wouldn't answer, he'd just lay there. And I could hear my daddy say, Buck, get up and build a fire. And Buck wouldn't respond, he'd just lay there. And pretty soon my dad would say, Buddy, get up and build a fire. And then it would be my job. I couldn't argue. I just had to roll out of that bed, and knowing full well that he hadn't got his stuff in, and had to go out to the wood pile and find enough wood and bring it in and get some kindling and try to get a fire going. And I would want to take one of those sticks of stove wood or firewood and hit him in the head with it, is what I really wanted to do. But it didn't work out that way. I probably would have been way ahead if I had done that. You know, with all the trouble I had with him over the years. But it just always worked out that way. And that's kind of my story, being a childhood in Vance, Alabama.
You want to tell that biscuit story about Buck?
Well, you know, my son here he wanted me to tell a story, and I talked about my brother, and this is kind of an unusual story. We were down at my granddaddy's house, and my granddaddy had an outdoor toilet, and they had I think this was, my brother was not more than 7 or 8 years old at that time, maybe. I'm not sure how old he is. I just remember it. And it was cold, and he had to go to the bathroom. And my grandmother made biscuits, and she made really good biscuits. You know, she made the small biscuits. And we always had sorghum syrup and biscuits. But she would make them, and I always loved to go to her house because she had the best biscuits, because she had those wood-burning stove, and she'd make those biscuits. And she had made biscuits that day, and we had 8, and of course, you know, there was never enough to go around, because there was 5 of us kids, and then, you know, there was 3 or 4 other people living there with my granddaddy, and so you just had to grab what you could. And Buck had got him a biscuit, and he had to go to the toilet, and he takes off, and he's gone for a while, and then he comes back, and he's looking for a hoe or something. And we said, what in the world do you need a hoe for? He said, I dropped my coat in the toilet. And we said, well, you can't wear that coat after you dropped it. You know, the outdoor toilets are dirty.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you can't wear that coat after you drop the thing in the outdoor toilet. He said, that don't matter. My biscuit's in the pocket.
Well, on that one, I guess we'll stop for today.
Yeah.
Thank you much.